right, welcome to a very special episode of Cosmic Road, where we are joined by the one and only Linda Eastburn. Welcome to the show, Linda.
Thank you.
Linda, of course, is the author of Threshold to Encounters. She is a Bigfoot researcher. She has been researching Bigfoot for 30 years. Do I have that right, Linda?
Well, not Bigfoot for 30 years. UFOs, paranormal. Bigfoot's been more like a year and a half.
Okay, so a researcher for 30 years, and you just recently got into Bigfoot. Okay, that's
Right.
interesting. So, what drew your attention to Bigfoot?
Well, it was kind of an odd thing that happened. I was actually doing a remote viewing, filming a remote viewing course at the time called Intuitive Journeys, and that's on
Are
my
you,
YouTube
I'm sorry, I
channel.
hate to interrupt, but are you yourself a remote viewer?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
I
cool,
taught
cool.
psychic skills and remote viewing and all of that, and did it as a service as well for a lot of years. Yes. Besides the research on UFOs and paranormal, I did that as well. So yeah, so I was doing the intuitive journeys, and one of the intuitive people on the show was exchanging kind of a little intuitive session. It was very minor, and I was looking at some future things because my bread and butter is real estate investing, and I was thinking about getting out of that, maybe, possibly, but I really had decided not to because it's just good money. So I was deciding to stay in that field. But she saw that I would kind of move away from that. And then at the end of that, she said, and by the way, this was brought to you by Bigfoot. And I go, what? Bigfoot, really? Because I don't know anything about Bigfoot. I think the closest thing was in the 90s. Someone brought me a tape, and this was in the 90s. We had audio cassette tapes. Someone brought me a tape of a vocalization of Bigfoot that they believed to be in this one area not far from me. I was really just researching UFO stuff at that time and didn't think much about that. Kind of put it away. And now I wish I had it, but somewhere in, multiple moves since the 90s, it's kind of gotten away from me, and I don't know where it is now. But other than that, I really did not know much about Bigfoot at all. So within a week, I saw an ad pop up on Facebook for a Bigfoot conference. Now, we had not had a conference locally before this that I knew of at all. So it caught my attention because she had said, this is brought to you by Bigfoot. So it kind of caught my attention. And I decided to go to that conference and see if there was anyone that was speaking that might be a really good person to interview and maybe do some remote viewing things with for my Intuitive Journey show. So I did attend, and I met Scott Nelson at that conference. If you know who Scott Nelson
I
is, if
don't
you're
know, Scott.
the Bigfoot world. Scott he's a linguist, and analyzed the Sierra sounds that was
Okay,
recorded
I
by,
probably have reviewed his research. I just don't
yeah.
know the name. Okay.
Yes. And so he didn't live far. So I set up a time to interview him. He was more than happy to do that. Went to the Kansas City area and interviewed him for about 6 hours. Came home and put that together. Now, by that time, I had released 10 episodes of Intuitive Journeys, and it really wasn't going anywhere. It was just so. And it's the first thing I'd ever done on YouTube. I wasn't real pleased with that. It just really wasn't, it didn't have traction. It was just kind of standing still. So I had just about decided by the time I edited and released this Scott Nelson video, I just about decided to kind of move away from the whole YouTube thing and go back to my long extended documentary work that was doing before, film work that I was doing before this. But we released it, and I remember it well. We released it on maybe a Tuesday or Wednesday, something like that. And I was about 30 miles away from my home with my sister that day. And I remember it about 2:30 in the afternoon, just looking to see how well the video did. And this was January of 2023. So that wasn't very long ago. And it had 850 views. And I thought, wow, that's good, because my other videos of Intuitive Journeys were going, like 100, 200, at the most.
Oh, I remember my early
Maybe more.
days. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was not going anywhere. So I came home. I went out for dinner, and it was about 5:30. I looked at it again and it was up to 2,500 views. And then it was 3,500 and 4,500. I mean, I was calling everybody I knew, wow, this thing was really taking off. The next thing I knew, it was like at 150,000 views, and now I think it's around 245,000 views or something like that. But it was the most popular thing that I put up. And from that, I got a Bigfoot following. And so I kept trying to find Bigfoot people to interview and talk to and make film with. And because I like to get in the field and film, but there were not enough Bigfoot stories to do that. So I had to basically start a type of podcast in order to keep the Bigfoot theme going. Since then, I've kind of branched out a little bit into more of the, not more, but some of the UFO paranormal ghost activity things. So it's kind of diversified now, but most of the videos are Bigfoot. But if you listen to the Bigfoot videos, by the end of the video, you will hear a lot of stuff that is also UFO, paranormal, orbs, things like that, because a lot of the same people have those same experiences.
So those UFO and paranormal things that you're also putting up, are they independent of Bigfoot, or are they in connection with Bigfoot?
It's all on my YouTube channel, but they're on different playlists. I have a UFO playlist. I have a ghost paranormal playlist. I have the Intuitive Journeys playlist that's still up there if anyone's interested in that one. Then I have more my serious documentaries, and then I have a Bigfoot playlist.
So do you still pursue remote viewing?
I'm getting ready to start a new project, actually. That was part of the excessive work today.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm fascinated by remote viewing. I've had a regular guest
yeah.
on the channel that does remote viewing for the channel.
Yes.
And so that's really neat. Have you ever remote viewed Bigfoot?
I started remote viewing Bigfoot just before I started the book, just a little bit, because I was getting mixed messages after a time about Bigfoot, whether Bigfoot was actually just a flesh and blood creature in the woods, or maybe part human being in the woods, or if Bigfoot was some kind of an interdimensional paranormal fairy-like creature. So I have remote viewed that somewhat, not as extensively as I would like to really get a good solid answer around it, but I have remote viewed it some.
But all of this was brought about by a remote viewing session of Bigfoot, where Bigfoot was giving you life advice. Basically, this is brought to you by Bigfoot. This life advice brought to you by Bigfoot.
Right, that's exactly right. So I think that's a form of mind speak, but it wasn't directly to me. It was through somebody else.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so tell us about Bigfoot. What have you found out?
Oh, well, I'm not sure that I have any definite conclusions, because I like to keep an open mind and not just box Bigfoot into something that I think Bigfoot is. I think probably Bigfoot is both paranormal and physical at the same time. I think Bigfoot lives in two worlds. But my book, Encounters, Threshold to Encounters, is really about a lot of the connection between that world where Bigfoot may live, aliens may live, ghosts may even be there, maybe where spirit goes, and how that threshold opens up and allows us to interact with those beings in some way. So the book really goes into a lot of the experiences I've had, as well as the experiences that I have investigated or researched or taken reports about all of those characters. So I think Bigfoot fits somewhat into that. Seems to be thought of more as a physical being, and the encounters that people have with Bigfoot do seem to be a bit more physical than the encounters that people have with, say, an alien or a ghost. But there's still elements that are very similar between all three, like batteries going dead. People go out and research Bigfoot and batteries go dead. People have UFO encounters, batteries go dead. I mean, it's one of those kind of odd things, as well as missing time. That's another thing that seems to correlate between not the ghosts so much, but certainly between the Bigfoot and the aliens. There seems to be some missing time element with some people. Electronic devices sometimes go down, just won't work at all. It's like some kind of an electromagnetic field around aliens and Bigfoot that seem to cause that. I don't know if they're from the same place and they interact in a similar way with humans, or if they just have some kind of an unusual electromagnetic field that travels with their body or their being, but does seem to have some similarities.
Well, for my research into Bigfoot and UFOs, there's definitely a big crossover. I mean, there's been examples where Bigfoot has been seen on the ground where a landed UFO was interacting with beings from the UFO. There have been other cases from experiencers who are abductees or contactees who have actually seen Bigfoot on the ship. And there's plenty of paranormal crossovers as well, ghost activity associated with Bigfoot. Although sometimes that's unclear if that may be an invisible Bigfoot. But yeah, the Bigfoot seems anomalous and also flesh and blood. I think most people seem to have flesh and blood encounters? What's the percentage of flesh and blood versus paranormal or anomalous?
Well, at first, it was mostly just flesh and blood accounts that I was getting. And then once I started hearing a few of the Orbs craft, disappearing, just in a flash gone, light anomalies, UFO craft around. Once I started hearing a lot of that, I started asking more. And the more I asked people, the more they would open up and tell me, yeah, I've seen this or seen that. Now it's very, very seldom do I get someone that hasn't at least seen orbs, but orbs may be just part of the natural part of the woods. I don't know. But the orbs seem to have intelligence. They seem to know where they're going. They seem to interact almost with people, and also rods of light as well. And,
Now,
and
are,
you,
are people seeing the orbs and the rods with their naked eye?
Yes, yes. They're seeing rods and orbs often with their naked eye. Ron Moorhead, who got the Sierra Sounds, actually saw a blue UFO craft up there, saw a rod moving strategically through the woods. They also heard strange sounds, humming, metallic sounds with no indication as to where it came from. And this is another thing that tends to happen with Bigfoot. You'll have people camping and they hear something in the campsite while they're in the tent, and it just sounds like they're destroying the place, absolutely destroying the place. And the next day they get up and nothing has moved. So, there's a sound phenomena that's going on, and that's almost ghost-like, where people hear things in a house or that they think is haunted, or they have some kind of noises that they can't put their finger on what's causing that. So that's a little bit of a correlation between Bigfoot and ghost.
That is super fascinating. Can you tell us a juicy story?
Do you want my story or do you want some other stories? Yeah.
Your story,
Well, I
absolutely.
can tell you some of my stories. I haven't had as many experiences as I've taken reports and done research on, but I have had a few experiences. When we were filming Byways of Bigfoot, which is the latest release of an actual film that I did, and it's on my YouTube channel as well. We were working an area along a river just to see if Bigfoot existed along that river. I had interviewed someone that had private property along that river, and they heard vocals in the spring and the fall. And so that's the only thing we really had to go on. But it's a beautiful river. It was called the Niangua River. It was named by the Osage tribe, and a lot of Osage tribe activity along that river all the way up the river, about 200 miles of it. We got maybe halfway. If we continue filming, we'll continue going on all the way up to Lake of the Ozarks. But this river, we started out at a landing place where you could put in a boat. That's kind of where we began, and the group all met there early one morning after a big rainstorm. And I didn't really expect to find any Bigfoot evidence. We're just looking, we're trying to find some. We went back to an area where there are some cliffs, and there was a tree that was not just broken, but it was kind of gnarled and twisted over. And there was a storm the night before, but there were no other limbs, no other trees, no other indication that there was wind or anything like that the night before, but that tree was down. Right below the tree, there was a footprint with toe marks right below it. Now, if that was a human something had to have toes, but if that was a human, they would have to have been out there in the kind of cold morning as well as in the rainstorm the night before to have left that print. And it was kind of in a really tight, sort of awkward place. So that was the first little piece of evidence
Was
that
it
we
a
had.
big, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
It was
was it a,
fairly large, but it was probably a juvenile. If it wasn't human, it was probably a juvenile. It wasn't
was it very flat?
It was kind of in a bank, the toes really sunk in there into a bank. We've got pictures of it. They're not real good. It was hard to get pictures. It wasn't good enough to cast or anything like that. But it was clearly there. But also to get to that, you had to go through a lot of brush. And I'm thinking, well, if it were a human foot, a human being walking up through there, I mean, it would just been very awkward, and no one knew we were going there. Even the crew and cast that I had with me, no one knew this is where we were headed that day. I was only me, and I wasn't up there barefoot making this thing. So we got that. And then later that day, we went to another conservation area and walked through the woods. And we were actually just looking for like a campsite area. And we found this marking on a tree about 9 feet up, which looked like some claw marks on it. Could have been natural to the tree. I don't know for sure. But anyway, that was an interesting thing. And then just right across from that, over into the wooded area. And we didn't really walk over into the wooded area that much, but we did walk. We saw there again, a tree down, a branch, and they walked over there and saw that. And then there were two footprints there as well, also, where you could see the toes. So we got those, and it's like, well, that's very interesting because we haven't looked that many places, but there it is. The next place we went after a while, it was later on in the filming, we went to Eric's place that has herd vocals. We found a trackway. We found another footprint, well, mostly the heel of an area where it kind of slid down someplace. Saw some evidence also of blackberry bushes laid down. Don't know if that was Bigfoot or not, but they were odd because they were laid down in a way that would not have been like water running over them or anything like that, but they were just flattened out, completely flattened out. So that was also an interesting find. So that was my sum total of Bigfoot evidence that I have personally been boots on the ground finding. Okay, and that's the one we filmed. But I did find out after that that the river area next to the cliffs, someone had been recreationally there many years ago, and they said someone came off the river and said, "Be careful because Bigfoot is around here." They had sighted Bigfoot somewhere around there. And then afterwards also, I found out on a couple of farms not far from there that people back in the 80s were reporting seeing something that they thought might be some escaped animal from a zoo, but it would look kind of monkey-like, but it was bigger and hairier and made some funny sounds. And 2 different farms were reporting these on their property. But no one was thinking Bigfoot in the 80s, it was back a ways, and nobody was just thinking Bigfoot, and it wasn't a big Bigfoot. It was probably a small Bigfoot that they were seeing. So there's other evidence that in that neck of the woods, there are some Bigfoot that are roaming around there. So that happened while we were making Byways of Bigfoot and after. Now, as far as ghost activity, I have had one experience with a ghost, and it was just a feeling. It was behind me, and I was in my living room. I was with a couple other ladies. This was before I started working on opening up my intuition, my psychic abilities. But there was one lady there that I really trusted. She was really very good, and she had sight. She could see energies moving around. And when I made the comment that I felt a little uncomfortable sitting there, I couldn't have put my finger on why, but I just felt uncomfortable. So I wanted to get up and move, get something to my back. And she said, well, she saw energy movement in that corner. But within just a few days, this is what was really interesting. Within a few days, a man came to my house for a hypnosis session. I also did hypnosis back in those days. He came to my house for a hypnosis session, walked in the door, didn't say anything. I directed him into that same living area. He didn't say anything. He just walked to the family room and looked outside and then walked back. And I think, well, he's behaving very strangely, and crossed his arms. And then finally he said, I think my dad used to live in this house. And he pointed to that very corner where I'd felt that uncomfortable energy. And he said, and he died right there.
Whoa.
That was kind of confirmation of what I was feeling, my friend was seeing, and then he confirmed it as my client that someone had died right there in that area. So that was kind of an interesting moment. Now the UFO, I've only seen one. I wouldn't call it a UFO. I call it an orange light. But it was late, kind of about 10 o'clock one evening. I was at my brother-in-law's house, and my husband was in the garage with him. This was way, way, way out in the country. No houses close by. You could not see another house. And there was a road right in front of me. And I was in an automobile just waiting while he was doing something in the garage. So as I'm looking, I'm out over a pasture. It's just a normal pasture with a tree line way in the distance, but the tree line was pretty high up. I could see an orange light that was just poised right there above the trees. And at first I thought, well, maybe that's an airplane or something and it's going to go over, but it didn't. It just stayed in one place for about 10, 15 minutes. And finally, it just slowly went down behind those trees. Well, I didn't think that much about that until the next day when I went to my in-laws' house. And they knew the people who owned that farm and the farms on each side of it. And there had been 3 animal mutilations that very night. The sheriff had come out, and so I may have been observing an animal mutilation as it occurred. I don't know for sure. But it was, I later learned that the orange lights were indeed associated with animal mutilation. So that's my only UFO encounter. I've traveled all over. I've taken groups out everywhere to see UFOs or to research sites that have had a lot of UFO activity, but I haven't actually seen one myself otherwise.
Have you ever done CE5?
I have not.
Okay, yeah. I have a UFO group and we practice CE5 and it works.
Yeah.
Sometimes in ways you don't expect, but it works.
Yes, try that.
Okay, yeah. So that's fascinating. So you have a wealth of experience and research, paranormal, Bigfoot, UFO, and I imagine some crossovers as well.
Well, it all kind of relates, in my opinion. I started with the hypnosis and then opening up my intuition, teaching intuitive skills, remote viewing skills, that sort of thing. Meanwhile, getting involved with the UFO community, doing abduction regression. So that kind of pulled me deeper into the UFO field. And then just the paranormal just kind of goes with all of that if you're in it. And now Bigfoot's made its way into the picture. Who knows what'll pop up next, right?
That's so cool. Now, when you were doing the research on the Bigfoot, and you were doing your documentary, and they were saying, beware, at some point in the past, they were saying beware of Bigfoot. Was that because there had been violent incidences associated with Bigfoot?
I don't know, but this is what I do know. Okay. And I think I write about this in the book, but I'm not sure if it made it into those pages or not. But there is a wooded area that's a very vast, large wooded area. It has a name, but I'm not going to say it because I don't want to send people out there. But this wooded area is known to kind of be haunted. And it goes back to like the 30s or 40s. And this could be just an urban legend, we don't know for sure, but someone, it's been passed down for years that someone was out in that wooded area in an automobile and was found, basically their body was gone and the only thing that was left was their hand. So that sounds more like a Dogman to me than a Bigfoot, because I haven't really heard of any vicious Bigfoot stories. Mostly they're just try to intimidate you. But Dogman, he'll just rip your head off. So I don't know. I haven't heard of any Dogman out there either. So
okay, so Dogman. So you've researched Dogman as well?
Occasionally it comes up in an interview. I wouldn't say I've researched Dogman, but I would say that I've heard a few incidences that people have had encounters with Dogman. It's and actually in my intuitive journeys, I had D.A. Roberts, who has written about and talks about Dogman a lot. He was on our show. He's local here to where I live. So that show was our prominent intuitive journeys show because he was on it, and it did make a lot of sense that what he was saying.
Okay, so what is Dogman?
I don't know. I don't know.
It's a more vicious.
It's might be a skinwalker. They all might be somewhat shapeshifters and skinwalkers. I don't know for sure. Not as many people seem to encounter Dogman as do Bigfoot, or at least that come forward, because I'm looking for Bigfoot people that have had encounters for my show. But I remember interviewing one man who talked about there were 4 boys and they were in this building and this Dogman shows up and they had built a fire and were kind of in a relaxed state, but this Dogman kind of comes after them inside the building. And luckily there was a train that came along and Dogman, left. but they were terrified. I mean, absolutely, they thought they were going to die that night. They were in a lone warehouse way out in the boonies, you know, a factory or something that had been deserted. And they ended up making it home, but they were terrified. And as this man talked to his priest or his minister or whatever, they kind of concluded that they probably all kind of tripped over into a little bit of a paranormal world, or maybe, you know, kind of went through a portal or a dimension to see all of this, that it's real, but it isn't really real. But the town seemed to know that this area where they were, where this happened, has had several incidences like this. So I don't know if that area has some kind of an odd energy portal, or, you know, or something. I don't know. And then also, when we talk about UFOs, people who have had experiences sometime relate. Like this one woman, she was at her house and she went over to her neighbor's house to borrow something. And as she's making her way across this kind of long lawn between the two, about halfway through, suddenly it was like she just stepped over a line. And suddenly it's like her emotions are different. She sees a craft. She sees little aliens in the yard. And suddenly, you know, like she's 110% there with them, but she's not afraid. She's not panicking. She's just seeing them and observing them. Then after a time, they go away and she goes back to her normal self, and then she panics. But it's like this, you know, it's almost like this line that's drawn in the sand, so to speak, where a person is normal, where we have our reality, and then you just step over this line and suddenly you're in this world of whatever these, you know, these beings are, whether it be, you know, ghost, or whether it be some kind of poltergeist activity, or a dogman, or a Bigfoot, or an alien. You know, it's like there's this something that changes. It not only changes the reality we're seeing, but it changes us as well and how we're experiencing it, possibly.
Is that the threshold to encounters?
Threshold to encounters is like it covers every possibility that I could think of. And even projection, you know, that there was this man early on. I barely gotten into UFO research. I was teaching hypnosis at the time. There was this man that came to my house, and he was a stockbroker actually, but he was older now, very intelligent. He asked brilliant questions. He surpassed most of my students, you know, as far as his comprehension of what we were doing. But at one point, I was doing practice sessions. We met once a week, but we were doing practice sessions on another night because we had an exceptionally large class that week. And he was there for the practice session. He ended up being the only one that came. But at that point, he was trying to like say something, but you could tell he was reluctant to say it. You know, we kind of start and kind of stop and start and stop and tell me a little, but then kind of back off. And I could tell he was real uncomfortable with the subject matter. And I had no idea what he was trying to tell me. But it all revolved around when he was young, he went back east and went to college. And he married a woman that was of deep pockets money. We're talking deep, deep, deep pockets money. And because he married her, he was brought into this organization that he said if he told me, I would know it, but he would not mention. I'm so sorry, my phone's going off. I'll get that off. So he was brought into this organization by her family, and he went up the ranks of this organization very quickly because of the family. So at the top of this organization, they were doing some really pretty strong occult things. And he was apparently one of them that they would project to, and they would project images and news headlines and all kinds of things to, and he would, you know, respond to that, see how he would naturally respond to that. Well, he had long since divorced this woman, moved back into my neck of the woods, where he had grown up initially. And he was still receiving these projections he felt. But these were the projections he was receiving. He was seeing aliens on the wall of his house. He would go outside and he would see UFOs everywhere. He was getting all kinds of, you know, fed information, prophetic things about the future. He was seeing headlines still. He was just seeing all of this phenomena. And he wanted it to stop. He had kind of, you know, had enough of this and
Yeah,
wanted
don't
it.
blame him.
And so he was there he was there asking if I knew anything about mind control. And he was asking if I would be able to help him, move through that. He had not mentioned that previously in the class, but this night, since it was the only student there, he did. But that makes you have to think in terms of how much is our mind able to perceive projections from people. And he said they were just like real. It was like these aliens looked real. The UFOs looked very real, but he felt like they were just projections from this same group. So that's what in the book. That story's in the book, and it talks a lot about those possibilities. The other one is holograms.
Hanging out, I've got to ask more questions about this crazy occult activity this group was doing.
I know.
What occult? What cult? What faith? What discipline?
Oh, it was probably just a secret society organization. It wasn't a cult. It was occult.
Right,
so
right. But what disciplines? What modalities? What were they doing?
He would not tell me that much information. I think he was still very nervous about giving out any real information about them. He was very, very secretive about that part of it. But at one point, and I'm not really very paranoid about anything. I've been around a lot of stuff, and I just don't get very concerned. But there was at one point when he was talking that I didn't know for sure if he was there telling me, so I knew about this, or if he was there actually asking for help. But the weird thing, this is the really weird thing. That night he left. 2 nights later, we were supposed to have class, and I wasn't feeling real well. So I'd asked my husband if he'd just call the students and ask them, just don't come tonight. I just didn't feel good. So he did. This guy's phone number was completely disconnected, and he was just vanished. It didn't see him again. So that was another really weird thing. So
have you ever found him?
Nope, never.
He's just gone.
He's gone.
So you don't know if these images that he was seeing stopped, or
no idea
how that.
Nope.
Okay. Wow.
Either he felt really uncomfortable telling me the story, or somebody got to him. I guess that was at the far end of that. He was deceased or something. But or he just up and moved, or I don't know. I mean, we were only, I think it was like an 8-week course, and I think we were only about halfway through the course. So he just didn't come back. It was just over. So that was a really weird thing. So projections are in there, holograms, the technology we have today of what can be projected. Are we as humans capable of knowing what we are viewing and from where we are viewing it? Is it a spiritual thing we're viewing? Is it a projection we're viewing? Is it a technologically like a hologram we're viewing? Or is there some illusion of what we're seeing? So I think we have to get to a place where we do understand all of that too. Not just this is what we saw, bottom line is it's real. I know that's all we have to go on, and I certainly go on that too, and I don't blame anyone for doing that, nor do I judge anyone's personal experience. But I'm just saying we do have to give some consideration to all of these other possibilities.
So what is your take on, the afterlife and other dimensions, and how that relates to our reality?
I believe in an afterlife for sure, of human spirit. I believe we have a soul and it does live on. Whether we have reincarnation, I don't know. It's possible. All of nature seems to recycle, so I guess that's possible. But I don't know for sure. I used to do a lot of past life regression, so but you don't have to believe in that necessarily to do it. It seemed to have some value, and certainly there was a lot of lives that seemed to help people if they understood, kind of where they'd come from. So I don't know if it's interdimensional, or if there's just an overlay of a reality that's with us, around us all the time, and we just have a limited perception, which we do have a very limited perception. My dog can see and hear things better than I can. Well, maybe not see, not see, certainly hear and smell way more than I can. So if you just look at the animal kingdom and human perception, look at what a hawk can see, and the movement that they can detect. It's just unreal.
Oh, sure. Well, birds can sense like magnetism. They know north and south. They have the sense organ or whatever for polarization or magnetism. It's wild.
It is, yeah. So there's all kinds of things that it's probably going on around us all the time. We just don't have any perception of it. So, and maybe every now and then we do. And also this tends to run with people, you know, once a person is, or maybe they've always been able to see things or perceive things, you know, they may see way more than I see because maybe I don't have that opened up yet.
Have you ever been yourself gone through hypnotic regression to remember a past life or anything like that?
I've gone through a lot of training in doing past life regressions and putting myself under. That was one of the many exercises I did in learning how to do, you know, remote viewing and do a lot of the psychic work I later went on to do. That hypnosis was real instrumental in being able to do that.
Anything juicy there?
Well, when I first started, it was kind of a weird beginning with remote viewing. I was already doing psychic things, but I was kind of introduced to this more from an inner growth kind of, inner perception, inner growth kind of thing. It was more spiritual than it was physical. And then I go to a UFO conference, and there's this guy that is giving a presentation. He had been to Russia, and they had an extensive remote viewing program, apparently, as a spy system in Russia. And there were these two guys that were retired, I guess. And he had interviewed them, and he came back with all these stories. And that was part of his presentation, this remote viewing, just elaborate remote viewing capacity of these Russian remote viewers. Well, I came home from that thinking, gee, I want to do that. I've never really tried doing this toward just a physical thing or a location. So I came home and I thought, well, how am I going to do it? I don't have a hypnotic conductor, but I can take myself in. I just need to have something to remote view and then be able to go later and look at it and see for sure that it's right. So I picked a phone number. Remember we used to have phone books? We had those old phones.
Back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day. Well, I had a phone book there. This was the early 90s. So I opened up the phone book and I thought, okay, if there is a street address and a phone number, there's probably a house there, right? So my goal was to stand in the middle of the road in the remote viewing session, look at the house from the front of the house and be able to describe it. Okay, everything about it that I could. And these would be areas of town I had no idea what the house looked like. So I put myself into a hypnotic state and I connected with my target through the address. And initially I saw this baby blue house, but every fiber of my being told me, no, that is not your target. Just get rid of that one. So I exited out, got it out of my mind, went back into the address from the phone book and connected with that. And I came into it really close, like really, really right up next to the house. Now I told myself to be in the yard or in the road in front of it and look at it, but no, I was right up next to the house. I could actually see the runs in the paint. That's how close I was. And it was kind of a really, really, really light. I saw it as white, but I moved back away from it, saw a black roof, one tree in the yard, very well placed. It was a small 1-car garage, ranch style house. Had that old green, grassy carpet, on the porch going up to the house, little bitty porch, concrete, had a white, broad post, at the edge of the house, had a big picture window in the front. And I saw the garage, I think, on the left or the right, but I only got 2 things wrong. I drove by it later that day. I only got 2 things wrong. The paint was like a pale gray. And the garage door was on the opposite side. Everything else about it was correct. But with the really interesting thing, right next door was the baby blue house that I saw.
Oh, wow.
And it's like later on, whenever I actually went and studied with a lot of the remote viewers that was trained, military trained, or worked for the CIA and worked for the spy system. So from their perspective, it was really interesting to hear them say that if you remote view an area, your mind will naturally migrate to the most interesting thing in the area, because it's no different than looking at a landscape in front of you. If your eyes were wide open, you will go to or look at the most interesting thing in that landscape. Well, the same thing is true with remote viewing. You don't get that kind of curiosity out of your mind just because you're remote viewing a subject. So then you have to pull your mind back, to the target itself. But I found it really interesting that my mind was able to know the difference between the blue house was not my target. My target was the other house. So that was kind of a cool story, to
Okay, so for remote viewing taskers, there's a lesson for you. Don't target a boring subject that's right next to an exciting subject. Okay.
Well, yeah, but you don't usually know what your target is, so you can't even know that. But it was my feelings that was telling me this. Like, no, that's wrong. That is a wrong target. Get out of that. So listening to yourself, in the midst of it, you kind of know if it's right or wrong. In doing the remote viewing. Now the hardcore technical remote viewing, the one where you have to stay in it for an hour and a half or 2 hours and draw out every single friggin' picture, and do that. I kind of have a modified version that's sort of an intuitive remote viewing version, still drawing, still working with all of that, but also allowing your inner self to participate in the process. I know that they say, no, that's wrong, but I find it to be much kinder to the people that are already doing psychic things.
Okay, so you have your own remote viewing process that you've developed. Are you
Yes.
teaching? Is this the process that you're teaching in your class?
Well, it is for the I'm not really teaching a class at the moment. The class that I was teaching for the show was a very, very modified version because we had a lot of students, a lot of filming, and we actually had some pretty good successes. But I didn't teach them at all. They were some of my old students, and some of them were just naturally good. I called upon people who were already psychic to come into that show, and some of them were definitely not psychic, and some of them were. We had some really good hits in the show, but we had a lot of hits, things that were not good hits. And I didn't do any of the remote viewing in the show. It was just for the show. But it was still and people can go to that intuitive journeys, watch it, and you can actually do the remote viewing yourself before we show the answer to it. So that's a way that you can practice remote viewing, is just play along with it as we do it.
Love it. Love it. I think remote viewing is so fascinating. Getting back to thresholds to encounters, what do you think is it that propels somebody to cross that threshold, start having these experiences? I crossed that threshold a few years ago after a lifetime of not believing any of this. So I'm very curious what activated, that journey in me and so many others. What is it that, does that?
Well, mostly I was thinking of the other way around, where these entities or beings cross a threshold and come into our world, but certainly we have to cross a threshold and go into their world too, possibly, to be able to have the encounters. Sometimes it's just happenstance. Or it's just something that we don't even know what caused it. For me, it was just the mystery of it all. It's just I was always intrigued with the mystery of it all. It wasn't until I was about 40 that it all kind of opened up for me. But it was because I was taking some classes, I think, and really looking deeper into that mystery that I liked. For other people, people who have Bigfoot encounters, I mean, it's just like they just have that encounter. They're not looking to have that encounter mostly. A few of them are, but mostly, they'll just have something that indicates that there's a Bigfoot around, or they'll just have a natural occurrence. Sometimes that's true with UFO stuff too, even though many of the people who have been abducted, you find out that they have had encounters all of their life. It's just a very repressed memory of it all.
What is your take on abductions?
I think they're probably very real. I don't know at what level you have that. I mean, there's physical evidence that something has occurred within that person. But they're very real, but but on what level they're happening, if it's actually a physical craft, or if it's there again, a dimensional thing that you're taken to the craft, but where is the craft? Is it actually physically there? Is it the reality like you and I live in every day, or is it some dimensional thing with that we're crossing through that threshold again? I just listened to Travis Walton. I don't know if you know his story or not, but he had a really phenomenal story a long time ago. And he talked about going into this craft, and of course he was there for several days, and the craft wasn't anywhere to be seen, so and just a phenomenal experience. Now they obviously brought him back, and he made his way back into society here, because he's here to tell us about it. And but just a really phenomenal thing. Where was he? What was he experiencing through all of that? We think of it as, oh, it was just a craft. It took him someplace, and that's where he was. But did he actually go into a different dimension? I don't know.
I mean, from my research, I think there is definitely a dimensional component to it. I
Mhm.
think people are being physically taken, but there is also certainly some other metaphysical aspect to it as well. Maybe sometimes both together at the same time. Uh,
Yes, I agree. I think Bigfoot's the same way. I think, it's yeah, it's sure that's flesh and blood. Those craft, those UFOs, that land, yeah, that's physical. That's a physical thing. But is it able to somehow pour it into something or somewhere that we can't even fathom as to what it is or where it is?
Okay, now here's an interesting remote viewing project for you. If you want a really a good one, it might be kind of dangerous. I don't know. I mean, honestly, the hybrids that are said to be created by the abduction phenomenon, that either live on Earth or aboard ship, if you could remote view them, and let us know, or get your team or whoever to do that. I'd be very curious to know what life is like and what the motivations are of these hybrid beings.
Well, yeah, and you hear that so much, or at least did back, a few years ago. I haven't heard much about abductions lately, and I haven't heard too much about the hybrids lately. So I don't know if that was just a limited time span project. I've kind of heard that it might have been, but there are these, half alien, half, humans that are out there somewhere, supposedly, and I don't know if they were trying to multiply their people on another planet, or if they're living among us here.
Well, I've heard all answers, and there's definitely debate about whether that program has ended or still going. Seems like people are still having these experiences. I don't know if that's like declined though, which would be very interesting. I mean, if there was a program and it had phases, as David Jacobs has talked about, if we've entered the next phase where the hybrids are mature and they figured this thing out, what does that mean? Are they here among us? If so, what are their intentions? But maybe they went back to their home world. Maybe that was the game plan all along. That's why we need remote viewers to figure this out.
It needs to be a long-term project of just looking at all of that. Yeah, I'm sure someone has done it out there, but I haven't. So, but
Okay.
there's even suspicion that that all of us are hybrids. That's how we came about from this get-go. So who knows?
Yeah, that is commonly reported by experiencers that the beings say that. They do give different versions of how that happens. So I don't know if
Mhm.
that's, necessarily, who knows? Who knows? But all right. So tell us another juicy Bigfoot story, even if it didn't happen to you. What's a fun Bigfoot story? What's your go-to favorite Bigfoot story?
Well, this is one that actually correlates the UFO phenomena with Bigfoot. And it's really kind of interesting. There were three guys out. They knew an area that Bigfoot existed, and they were just out at night. They were kind of up on a hill looking down, and there was an area down there they could see 12 pair of eye shine, and they knew that was Bigfoot, down in this area. And so they're just observing that. And there was a valley down below, quite a ways down below all of this, because they're on a perch. These three guys are kind of looking down, see these Bigfoot, see the 12 pairs of eyes. And all of a sudden there is this fast moving kind of fireball is kind of how he put it, but it's kind of a UFO like light thing that's just moving very fast. Boom, goes down through the woods and it lands in the valley. And all of a sudden, all 12 eyeshine turns around and they could hear them just stampeding down through the woods, down to the valley where that light was, and ended up down there. Now, before that, this was an interesting part before that. Um, this guy had had quite a bit of interaction with this Bigfoot clan, so he kind of knew a lot about them. And he was out there quite a bit researching in that area. That day, he'd been out there, and on the road, the path that he normally went down, there was a tree that obviously was deliberately over the road, and he knew immediately when he saw that something's going down tonight. So that was when he went and got the other two guys. I think one was his son and the other one was a friend, and said, okay, we need to go out there and see what's happening tonight. So when he did, he really kind of felt like that there was a rendezvous that was going to happen between this UFO and these Bigfoot, and they didn't want anyone there. Now, whether that was true or not, I don't know, but certainly the way it turned out, it could have been.
That's a great story. I love it. So did anything come of that?
Nothing other than just seeing it. I mean, they were a long ways from the craft and the Bigfoot that was down there, so they didn't know exactly what was taking place, but they did observe all of that.
Okay, so we got a UFO, we've got a Bigfoot. Do you think that Bigfoot went aboard the UFO?
I don't know. I did an interview one time with someone else, though, that had this very real kind of abduction experience. And while they were in the middle of this abduction experience, they were on board a craft, and they looked over and there was a Bigfoot in like this test tube looking thing in fluid. And it was like, he kept questioning that, and they just kept saying research, and he said, did you make that? And he's like, no, they didn't make it, but it was like they didn't just grow Bigfoot on the ship and then let them out someplace, but it was some kind of research they were doing with this Bigfoot. So once again, that puts together Bigfoot and the aliens.
I wonder, do you think that the aliens may have created Bigfoot? If they created us, maybe they created Bigfoot.
It's possible. I don't know. One person said that they use Bigfoot in the woods to do research in areas that they can't get into. Now, I don't know where they got that information, but that's what they said. That they are part of their, they kind of, are part of their group. I don't know. But they were definitely in the woods for that purpose, they said.
What are your next steps for your research?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm getting ready to do this new research project that I'm not talking about yet. If it's successful, you'll hear about it. If it's not successful, we may just keep working at it until we can make it successful. But it's something that's more, it's a little bit out of that paranormal, Bigfoot, alien realm. It's a little bit removed from that. It's more of a meat and potatoes, real life situations that we're going to start doing some remote viewing on that. I hope it's successful. I think it will be an interesting project.
Well, good luck to you. I can't wait to hear
Thanks.
about it when you're ready to talk about it.
Yeah, well, and if it's successful, we'll let the cat out of the bag, and I'll have probably a new class I'll be teaching.
Okay, very cool, very cool. And just to be clear, because you were saying earlier that some people were psychic and some weren't. Can anybody learn remote viewing?
That's a really good question, and I'm definitely the person to ask. I had almost no psychic ability until I was 40. It was like, I went to these classes and they would do these color, all these different colors and, all these cards, and this person would project the color and then you write down the color you think it is and all this. I was like the bottom of the list in that class. I was terrible at this, absolutely terrible at it. So I really wasn't psychic at all. When I started really working on being psychic, what I found was it took a real interest in the subject matter that I was remote viewing or being psychic about before I was able to really get information back. And I kind of teach my students that way too. It's kind of like, okay, if you bought a real expensive item and you took it back to the service counter at a store to return it, you're paying real close attention at that point as to whether or not you can return this item and get your money back, right? Because it's important to you. You want to get your money back. You want to return this item. If it's, like a $1.50 item that, oh, well, I'm not going to use this, but, is it even worth even taking it back? But when you get there, it's a $1.50 item. Are you listening to every single part of their return policy when they start rattling that off? Probably not, because it's a $1.50, and frankly, you could throw it in the trash and it wouldn't matter. So it's a matter of your intentions and how strong your focus is toward your target when you're remote viewing or when you're doing anything psychic or intuitive. And what I found was if I had an emotional interest in whatever it was, then the information came back very quickly, very accurately, and very sharp. And that's where I put a little bit of my intuitive remote viewing into the remote viewing process. Remote view targets that are important to you, remote view targets that you have a vested interest in, and you'll get a lot more accurate information.
That's fascinating. Okay, so and it's interesting that emotion didn't color the remote viewing; it actually made it sharper.
I think it was because I learned to listen to my body long before that. And so your body will speak to you. You know, that's how I knew the blue house was not the right house. My body would speak to me. And what I would do is I would start listening to my heart, because really intuition comes more through the heart channel than just the brain. But if I'm listening to my heart, it's a lot like if you were telling a story and you explain something, but you know you haven't explained it accurately, you know, you haven't used the right words. It's not exactly like that. It's more like this. But there's some part of your body that'll say, no, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't feel right. You know, and then you start looking for the right word to make it accurate or truthful. And when you find the right word, you know it's the right word and you can go forward then. But it's like my body will stop me if I'm going down the wrong road. It's like, no, that's not right. You know, that, no, don't go there. So I teach people to listen to their body first. You learn focus, you learn attentiveness to your body, because your body knows the truth, and your body knows your body is not as limited. Your aura, your energy field outside of your body isn't as limited as our five senses are. So if you can get out of your body and then listen to outside, your focus is outside your body on your target, but your attention is, how am I responding to this? And I often tell people when I didn't really just do psychic sessions. I worked as a medical intuitive for a lot of years, helping people to understand their mind-body connection. And I didn't diagnose anything. I could not do that, but I could lead them in the right direction to hopefully work with their physicians to be able to get better attention, or maybe even tests that they hadn't thought about running or something like that that might be helpful. But I tell people how to listen to their body first and then do the psychic work. So that's a little different approach than some of the technical remote viewing.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, now I think we have time for one last question. Getting back to thresholds to encounters, you say that it's not about us crossing over into their world, but more about them crossing over into our world. I know that we need to read the book to get all the answers, but is there anything that you can tell us that you have found about, you know, how they cross over and why?
Well, how they cross over, I'm not sure, but there does seem to be some interaction. And when I said it's more about them crossing over, it's really about both. But I focus more on them crossing into our world than us crossing into theirs, because I think it's easier for them to do that than it is for us to do that. But I don't think you can ever take the person out of the experience. So I think it's our willingness to also be present in that experience as well, or maybe even looking for that experience in some way. Because you can't take the person out of it. I think we're born with certain sensitivities. For me, I was latent before I opened those up very much. I was 40, and a lot of hard work. I spent about 6 years of really deep practice. So I built strong myelin around those sensors in my brain to be able to know when I was right or when I was wrong. And it was real important to me to not just throw any kind of information out there. I needed to prove to myself if it was accurate or not. So like even the remote viewing of the houses, I did 2 or 3 of those a week for about a year before I really concluded, okay, I'm pretty good at this. You know, I began to recognize I was good, but I was doing it so much. I had the luxury of the time to be able to devote to that. So if a person learns this, anyone can learn it. I think you have to have the motivation, you have to have the practice, and then you have to have know that you're getting accurate skills with it, which is the feedback system, to really be able to progress with it well.
Okay, and were you going to talk about why the beings cross over into our reality?
Oh, why they do? You know, that's open for discussion. Every person that I interview probably has a different answer to that, as well as I would. I think there is some growth on human consciousness where we are possibly learning to accept that there is a different reality out here than what we have been taught, but also what we experience daily. It's kind of like if you listen to, because I love the physics world, even though I'm nowhere near bright enough to really do anything physics wise, but I love listening to their world. But the latest of the most progressive physics out there is saying space-time as we know it is not holding water even mathematically at this time. So, I think there's something beyond this. We're getting a glimpse of it. We're getting kind of some knowledge of it. In ancient times, people didn't think twice. They just interacted with aliens and ghosts and spirits and maybe Bigfoot too. They didn't think twice about this. Native Americans, that's just part of their world. They're
That's
open
the star
to
people.
It was when when Western society began, we began to cut off that knowledge and information. So this isn't new to us, but we may have to reorient ourselves back into knowing what's going on.
Well, here. I hope we do. I hope we do reorient, and I hope we have a smooth reorientation. But I hope it happens in the near future. I think it would help a lot of people and make the world a better place.
I think it'd be more interesting too.
Right, right. Oh, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody go check out her book, Linda's book, Threshold to Encounters. And where can people find you?
It's on Amazon.com, Threshold to Encounters, Linda Eastburn, Amazon.com. And also my YouTube channel is just Linda Eastburn YouTube channel.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think this was super fascinating.
Thank you. Enjoyed it very much.
All right, everybody give Linda a big thumbs up and a big thank you for joining us today. And see you next time. This is Jack and Linda with Cosmic Road.